When did anime begin? That's actually a really hard question to answer. It is documented that it began in 1917, but it could also have been with Astro Boy in the 60s, the influential anime created by Osamu Tezuka, the acclaimed godfather of manga and anime, and popularized the art form with its distinctive big eyes. One must not forget of Kajiwara's Ashita no Joe, with its grounded story of boxing in the late 60s and 70s. Or it might have been with Isao Takahata and Hayao Miyazaki, with their shows Heidi and Lupin III, or even with their films when they formed Studio Ghibli. Maybe it was during the 80s, when anime grew as both an industry and an art form, culminating with Katsuhiro Otomo's Akira that aired in 1988 and is considered to be one of the most influential films ever. All of these answers could be accurate, because when something begins, it doesn't have to be when it actually started, but it can be when we are presented to it, like it was presented to me in the early 90s with a young boy who had this weird tail hanging out from his behind, who lived in the far-off mountains alone and guarding this little ball with 4 stars, who was crazy strong, but also incredibly charming. The young boy named Son Goku, and that anime was Dragon Ball. That's where it all started for me, when I was still very young, and it influenced the whole world in the 90s. So much so that I was living in a foreign country that wasn't broadcasting it yet, and I bought every VHS tape that existed in my home country so I could watch it anywhere I was. If it wasn't being shown to me, then I would find a way to watch it. All because I wanted to see this character named Son Goku go from this charming young boy to become one of the world's strongest warriors, to overcome every struggle and villain he went through. And I'm going to be talking about it today. Not the whole show, but the original Dragon Ball that was aired on TV before the change to Dragon Ball Z, the show that started it all. And even though I do feel this is pointless for the majority of the viewers of this video, I should warn that I will spoil this show heavily. You have been warned. It's time to talk about the original Dragon Ball. Influenced by the Chinese novel Journey to the West, Dragon Ball was a manga created and illustrated by Akira Toriyama, starting in 1984 and serialized in Weekly Shōnen Jump. And in 1986, Toei Animation produced a Japanese anime television series of the same manga. Suffice to say that both the manga and the anime will not only be hugely successful in Japan, but also everywhere else in the world, and I will focus more on the anime, but only the parts that represent the core context that is shown in the manga. And in order to do that, we need to go back all the way to the first episode where our adventure begins. Dragon Ball tells the story of a young boy called Son Goku, who is introduced to a young teenager called Bulma. Bulma is set out to find 7 existing magical stones called the Dragon Balls, and when finding all 7, a magic dragon called Shenron can be summoned, who is then able to grant one wish of any kind. Straight from the bat, we understand exactly who Goku is and what he is like. This innocent young boy, who has been living alone for quite some time after his grandfather passed away, not only survives a bullet to the face, but he also straight out defeats the first foe he comes across. This is probably one of the most inspiring things for any young kid, to see this really small, charming, good-hearted boy being able to overcome easily someone who is much bigger and way more frightening than our main protagonist. But most of all, how charming this all is through Toriyama's amazing understanding of comedy. He doesn't just use comedy to make us laugh, but to show who each character is and how they juxtapose with each other to make each personality more distinct. And from this point on, Goku's life would never be the same. Dragon Ball is the quintessential shonen anime. Shonen normally having the definition of young boy, not only is it a genre, but also intended to target a certain demographic of people. And shows like Dragon Ball, Naruto, One Piece and My Hero Academia have that intent. To show young male protagonists wanting to overcome some sort of struggle, whether from the outside or within, to reach the outcomes they set out for. In order to do this, this is normally divided into sagas, where our protagonist is faced with something new. And Dragon Ball would cement this by having a clear main goal throughout the entire series, and that is, Goku always wants to get stronger. It's such an easy and simple premise. He wants to get stronger, and thus we want him to get stronger too. And then this is taken even further in Dragon Ball Z, and focusing on overcoming the most fearsome villains of the show. Even though Dragon Ball Z is still technically Dragon Ball, since it was always called that throughout the entire manga when it was illustrated, there's no doubt that as the story goes along, it becomes more and more serious. While you gain even more struggle with that, having characters really question themselves, having the fate of the whole world and even the universe at stake, you also lose the charm that it had in the beginning, which is noticeable from the first episode. And it's that mix of charm and seriousness that in my opinion elevates the original Dragon Ball anime in comparison to Dragon Ball Z. After the first saga of finding the 7 Dragon Balls, Goku would train with Krillin under the guidance of martial arts master Muten Roshi, all to prepare themselves for the biggest martial arts tournament in the world. One where if you would win, you would become the Earth's strongest fighter. This is where the show would become more interesting thematically, because Muten Roshi didn't want these young boys who had become enormously strong winning the tournament on their first try. He wanted them to learn the value of failure in order to always try and become stronger, to stay humble, to not get cocky, to always have something to fight for. And he would be the one to make sure that would be the case. So, Muten Roshi would then disguise himself as an unknown fighter to participate in the tournament to fight against them and win. And he disguises himself because he doesn't want his students to be emotionally affected by their relationship with their master. And so, he would call himself Jackie-chun. Not only is this funny, it also shows how much of an influence martial arts movies were for Dragon Ball, like Drunken Master was. And by having Goku lose the fight at the end, it stays in tune with what Muten Roshi wanted in the first place. For this young boy to not reach so quickly the title of Earth's strongest fighter, to always have something to fight for. This saga would define tournament sagas for years to come in Shonen Anime. But if you were to ask me which saga is able to mix perfectly the charm and seriousness of the show, my answer would have to be the Red Ribbon Army Saga. Now, I know this isn't normally a fan favorite among many Dragon Ball fans, and some even consider it to be their least favorite saga, but I absolutely love it. Here's why. After losing the first World Martial Arts Tournament, Goku sets out to find the 4-star Dragon Ball, and in his pursuit, he encounters an army called Red Ribbon who are also trying to find the Dragon Balls, supposedly for evil purposes. And what Toriyama does is separate this major saga into mini-sagas. The Muscle Tower mini-saga where Goku has to defeat each foe in each level, having foes that are so confident in their abilities, but also brilliantly clumsy. The General Blue mini-saga where we are introduced to General Blue and his cunning intellect, but also how he steals each scene with pure charisma. How it even mixes both Dragon Ball with Akira Toriyama's previous work, Dr. Slump, and Witness Aral beat General Blue in the most comedic way. And then the Tonpai mini-saga, where a fearsome foe is introduced and full-on murders characters and places our main character in actual peril. This is the first moments of the show where the stakes are elevated and make us care more for our protagonist. With little to no time, Goku, through his sheer willpower, ultimately becomes stronger and is able to finally defeat Tonpai. And the culmination of this saga is Goku attacking head-on the Red Ribbon Army base, and he outright demolishes everyone in order to retrieve the Dragon Balls and puts a stop to their evil undoing. And after one last quest to find the last Dragon Ball, you have 2 incredibly heartfelt moments that makes this whole journey feel so fulfilling. Appa's father finally being resurrected and seeing Appa's emotional reaction, but also Goku reuniting momentarily with his grandpa, showcasing Goku's emotional vulnerability for the first time. How he is still just an innocent child. How lonely he must have felt all that time without the person who took care of him. This is how you mix a serious story and add so much charm to it. There are so many obstacles that Goku has to go through, so many different villains, so many different adventures, both with Goku alone or with Krillin and Bulma, and each villain is more threatening than the next, all without losing sight of what makes Toriyama's stories so engaging. That each character, in their own ways, are able to be so unique and appealing. Unfortunately, the original anime version drags this out a lot with filler and a lot of waiting moments, which ruins its pacing a great deal, unlike the manga where it always gets straight to the point. How Toriyama is able to weave wonderfully its charm with its seriousness. And in the next World Martial Arts Tournament saga, this is also shown superbly with the arrival of Tenshinhan and Chaozu as Goku's and Krillin's new rivals. How you have a fight between Krillin and Chaozu, which ends with Krillin winning because Chaozu doesn't know how to do math, which also shows how innocent and gullible this new rival can be. But also how serious it can be when Tenshinhan questions his teachings of his master and decides to let it all go, because all he wants is to become the Earth's strongest fighter, just like Goku. And both face off in the final through beautiful animation, almost like visual poetry. How Goku's goal and Tenshinhan's arc culminate incredibly well in this moment, not only thematically, but also visually. I remembered it being one of the best fights, but it could also be an instance where our memories make it seem better than it actually was. But when I rewatched this recently, I was blown away by how good it actually is. How each drawing, each movement, each punch had such fluidity in them. How you even see more damage occurring in their faces in the same shot. In a way, it makes me miss the style and direction of animation in the 80s and 90s, how this was prevalent not only here, but throughout the entire anime, both Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. It truly was a time where 2D hand-drawn animation was reaching its peak, and Toei Animation were masters at that, where you could almost see the touch of the pencil enhance every moment and really feel the tension in each scene thanks to amazing storyboarding and direction. Because it's not about animating everything, it's about choosing what should be animated to fit in the direction of the show, of what should be and shouldn't be shown. And this can be found in almost every major fight in the series, including this one, accentuating action but also focusing on each character's struggles, what each want to achieve, culminating with Goku's unexpected defeat. How we feel sad that our main character would still not yet reach the title of Earth's strongest fighter, but also happy to see Tenshinhan turn over a new leaf and develop as a character. All done through some of the best animation and direction the series has offered us. And from this point on, the show would start to change as a whole, where the drama would become the main focus and the charm and comedy would become more and more in the background, where Dragon Ball would set the stage for what it eventually becomes in Dragon Ball Z. And this is with the unexpected death of Krillin. This has to be, without a doubt, one of the most impactful moments in the show. You can see in Goku's face how distraught he is by this, how he wants to avenge the death of his beloved friend, the person who he trained with for so long, someone who he created a deep friendship with. All because there was a new foe that enters the scene that ups the stakes in a way we haven't come across before. And when Goku tries to avenge his friend, he almost loses his life not just once, but twice. But it doesn't end here. Both Muten Roshi and Chaozu, while trying to save the world, also die for nothing. The old wise master and the good-hearted young kid were now dead, gone, and makes us feel in a way we haven't yet felt before. 3 major characters that we love and adore have suddenly died, all because of the fearsome villain Piccolo Daimao. This is by far Goku's biggest obstacle yet, one that feels almost impossible to overcome, especially when Piccolo wishes for his youth and becomes even stronger than before. He is such a threat that right after he makes his wish, he immediately kills Shenron and the Dragon Balls turn into stone. Yes, we know later in the story that the dragon would be brought back to life, bringing back the Dragon Balls and all of our dear friends, but at the time, nobody thought this was even possible. We felt like these beloved characters were actually gone for good, and it really made you fear this villain. So, when you watch Goku go through all of his hardships and finally defeat Piccolo, it feels like such a victory. How even in the last moments of the fight, it made us believe that Goku would lose again, almost powerless, until he is able to deliver the final punch. Goku, who almost died against him, who had to go to the depths of the world to become stronger again, comes back and avenges everyone in one of the most iconic moments of the show. But this wouldn't stop here. At the brink of death, Piccolo Daimao spits out an egg, one that would give birth to his reincarnation as Piccolo Jr., who would become far stronger. Goku would still have to face this evil foe, and that would be during the final of the third and last World Martial Arts Tournament saga, where our main protagonist had grown both physically and mentally as a person and a fighter. This is where we really get to know Goku's character and fully understand his motivations. During the final of this tournament, with Piccolo Jr. destroying and devastating everything around him, with everyone fearing him immensely, Goku mainly wants one thing. Rather than just wanting to save the world, what he really wants is to become the strongest fighter on the planet, to fulfill all of his arduous training, having overcome every obstacle in his path to achieve this moment, and having that within grasp. What he truly wants is this: to fight against the strongest and succeed. This is Son Goku's ultimate passion, and in order to do that, he would have to fight and beat Piccolo Jr. in the final of this tournament. How the two types of sagas, both the villain and the tournament saga, become one and the same here. And Goku, after one of the hardest fights he has ever had to face, showcased again with beautiful animation, is able to defeat Piccolo Jr. and finally become Earth's strongest fighter. Goku's arc has ended. He has become what he has always wanted to be. The theme set out in the first tournament now reaches its climactic moment here. How the stakes have risen with each saga. How we have felt Goku struggle throughout a great portion of his life. How we see him going from an innocent and impulsive young boy to a calm and collected mature fighter. And how I feel this makes him so much more human. How he is not just doing it for everyone else. He is living his passion and doing whatever it takes to fulfill it. How it teaches us to do the same. To also fight for our passions, to fall during that journey, but then rise again. To learn more, to try harder until we eventually succeed through sheer will, but also through immense patience. How this show impacted me and so many of you to do the same. To look within, to really push ourselves in a way to exceed what we thought was humanly possible and achieve what we want. And Goku is the personification of that. So, how do you take this further, when this is clearly such a great ending to his character and story? Well, it is to up the stakes even more, to not just become Earth's greatest fighter, but become the strongest fighter in the universe, which is what Akira Toriyama ends up doing in the next sagas, shown in the continuation of the manga and in the anime titled Dragonball Z. But, with all its seriousness, drama and stakes, I cannot help but miss what made the show and manga really unique in the beginning. Watching Goku go on an adventure with Bulma to find all 7 Dragon Balls and meeting the likes of Yamcha, Puar and Oolong. Watching him train with his new friend Krillin under the teachings of Muten Roshi. Watching him go through that first tournament and fight against Muten Roshi in the final, and then culminating in both the Red Ribbon Army and the second World Martial Arts Tournament sagas, when you could really feel the heart of the show, to see all of these characters meet, to be able to connect with them, to feel for them during certain moments, but also laugh at Akira Toriyama's imaginative comedic writing. How we would never truly see this beautiful mix in Dragon Ball ever again, apart from some minor moments, and that's okay. Dragon Ball needed to become more serious, to have all of those iconic villains and transformations we would later come across, to see things taken to the next level, to see Goku and others push themselves even further, to become the most loved anime of that era and introduce to us all other types of anime. How the manga and series changed anime on a grand scale and would define what shonen anime is. And the innocence it used to have, like it was shown in the first episode, is something I will never forget. And how it reminded me of the innocence I myself used to have. And in a way, I too, like Goku, would never really become that young boy again. The one that watched this show for the first time. The moment where anime began for me.